Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 7th of November 2025. This is your daily synopsis of everything that's been going on in the war in Ukraine over the last 24 hours, the hits and losses, and a few other gems to throw in there as well. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share. It's really important. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, so one of my sons is happy. He's unhappy as it is. He just wants that silver plaque or something. Anyway, make a 15-year-old kid happy, and then he'll understand that I'm actually a proper YouTuber then. Okay, let's get right into it then. The hits and losses, the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. So all the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. 1,170 personnel lost, which is a fairly high number there still today, and yet 65 vehicles and fuel tanks. So for the second day in a row, we've got disparity between personnel losses and vehicle losses, knowing that the Russians predominantly use these vehicles, unarmored vehicles, motorbike squads, golf buggies, SUVs to do their attacks. And so normally when we see high personnel losses, we have high vehicle losses, but we don't. Now, the weather has been poor, and I think what's been going on is that the Russians have been using infantry-led attacks into the Pokrovsk area. They have been less able to get mechanized equipment, particularly, but also other equipment into the Pokrovsk area, although they did use poor weather as a way of getting in. There's video of an SUV in the middle of Pokrovsk that the Russians had used. But in general terms, poor weather means that there is less of this equipment being used. Now, previously, the Russians had tried to attack using poor weather, but they did that using traditional combat assets, mechanized armored equipment, and they tried these attacks near Konstantinivka and up near Shakova as well, Volodymyrivka there. So it is poor weather, but we haven't seen these large column attacks. We also haven't seen large numbers of other types of equipment being used, but the personnel losses are high, and I think that's the fighting taking place in predominantly taking place in Pokrovsk. Maybe the Russians have had a few troop accumulations hit by Ukrainian drones and whatnot. I don't know. We have a single tank, 2 armored combat vehicles, and 13 artillery systems. A low number of artillery systems, comparatively speaking, is an indication of poor weather, in my opinion. 1 single air defense system, so that's good to see one of those on the list. 65 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 2 pieces of special equipment. Okay, let's move on, and we're going to start as we normally do with personnel issues. Over 3 months, Russia has killed 5 and injured 30+ Ukrainian rescuers in 60+ strikes, according to the Interior Minister Klimenko. This is on the back of me talking the other day about the losses of journalists that we've seen during the course of the war. Now, some stats on Ukrainian rescuers. This often happens with double tap strikes, where the Russians will hit a particular place and wait for emergency services to come in and hit exactly the same location and coordinates 10, 20, half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour later, thus entailing that, sadly, emergency workers get hit, and as far as the Russians are concerned, hopefully killed. On November the 5th, Russian FPV drone attack wounded 4 in Zaporizhia Oblast, while an airstrike targeted a fire station in Kramatorsk. So not only the double tap strikes, but actually the overt targeting of emergency services infrastructure. We've seen a number of FPV drones purposefully try and take out fire engines and ambulances. It's absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. Okay, to hold ground gained through infiltration, Russia is reinforcing Pokrovsk with more troops, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Ukraine reports 30 assaults in a day. Elite units have been deployed, and soldiers are using bad weather, there you go, and civilian disguises to reach rear positions. It is really tough going in the Pokrovsk area, but it appears that the Ukrainians are deciding to hold on to Pokrovsk, or not so much hold on to Pokrovsk, but have their fight there. Like I've said to you previously, you've got to fight somewhere, otherwise you just give up the entire country. So the Ukrainians have to fight somewhere. It's about fighting where it is most advantageous for you to do so. Now, around Pokrovsk, there are decent defenses built in, and so, like, the dangerous part about Pokrovsk is this pocket that is almost entirely surrounded, and it's really important the Ukrainians don't lose troops that are encircled there. So it could be that the Ukrainians are desperately trying to keep the neck of this cauldron open and to do an operational withdrawal, or they are just fighting tooth and nail to hold on to what they have without trying to withdraw. I don't know. I can't imagine they won't be trying to withdraw from that pocket. But it does appear that they are choosing to stay there, and that could well be precisely because the Russians have amassed loads of troops there. That this is the perfect opportunity to attrit them in fundamental ways, and maybe the last couple of days of high Russian losses have indicated that approach is what the Ukrainians are trying out here, that they want to use this as a kind of Russian meat grinder, self-immolation, attrition opportunity. So yeah, that is looking like what's going on in and around Pokrovsk. Now, here's that video or that incident I was referencing where the Russians got in an SUV into the Pokrovsk area. So Hostri Kartuzi says, unfortunately, the bad weather is now playing into the hands of the occupier. Today, through the fog, we noticed the first Russian military pickup in the city. They took their time throwing down the barricades and drove through the streets of Pokrovsk. So that happened. When was that? So that's on the 6th. Yeah, that was yesterday then. Now, we have seen this video. Well, there's been publication of yet another video of Ukrainian medium-range drones. These are FP-2 drones, sort of 200-kilometer, 105-kilogram warhead drones, 200-kilometer range. Ukrainian special forces drones struck multiple fuel depots in occupied Crimea. So a fully loaded RVS-400 tank at the Hradiska oil facility was destroyed. We've seen this oil facility, I presume it's the same one in Hradiska, be targeted a number of times over the last month, along with 2 fuel trains at a nearby loading rack. Additional hits were reported on fuel storage sites in Simferopol and the village of Bitumne. Now, this won't be from last night. This will be from at least the night before, where I was reporting these incidents happening. But now we have the evidence of them here in yet another video of these kind of FP-2 drones acting like glorified, big FPV drones. These are utilizing first-person view kind of mode, and I presume that's how they're striking. It looks like they're just being controlled to then strike at these particular places. That looks like, oh no, that is I was going to say that looks like a substation, but no, that seems to be oil trucks there on all train carriages. But hitting both sort of train oil loading infrastructure as well as depots and containers like this one, as you can see there. Anyway, success for the FP-2 drones yet again, as Ukraine is routinely trying to hit targets within occupied Crimea particularly. Now, I'm showing you this video just because we used to see heaps of these videos. I almost talked to you a couple of weeks ago about how we very rarely see unguided rockets being sent by Ukrainian helicopters anymore. My speculation was that they had started using helicopters primarily to shoot down Shaheds, maybe calling them back from sort of frontline unguided rocket attacks to shoot down Shaheds because they've been really successful in intercepting Shahed drones. And I think they're relatively cost effective, would be my opinion. And there just aren't enough of them, right? So I'd imagine that there's more use in shooting down Shaheds than firing, repeatedly going on these missions to fire unguided rockets that would, I assume, have limited success, and maybe they'd run low on unguided rockets. Anyway, just interesting to see another video of a Mi-24 firing unguided rockets in a way that we haven't seen for months and months and months. Okay, now interesting. Unknown saboteurs are torching locomotives inside Russia, with Ukraine's military intelligence claiming dozens have been destroyed. And they, I presume, list them there. According to the GUR, the acts were carried out by supporters of the Freedom of Russia movement. So here's a montage of loads of locomotives and bits of railway infrastructure being sabotaged, being set on fire, particularly. Quite incredible that the Russians behind, not behind the lines, but actually deep inside Russia, are continually carrying out this kind of activity. This is still happening. It's great news. Tim White says, this cannot be verified, but Legion claims they were used to supply weapons, ammo, and equipment for the invaders. That's the locomotives in question here. Legion's Svoboda, in which the anti-Putin freedom fighters say they have destroyed numerous train locomotives inside Russia. Long may that continue. We have another sort of Windows situation. Actually, it's not. It's Kirill Grekov, the Deputy Prosecutor General of the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, has been found hanged in temporarily occupied Luhansk. But same kind of thing. Is it suicide or is it a mock suicide? In terms of it being actual murder. Okay, we have distant strikes and not a lot of information from either side on what happened last night. We're going to look back at other claims concerning things taking place over the last few days. But before we get there, I mean, there is a little bit of information about the strikes inside Ukraine. 128 drones were sent into Ukraine, 94 were intercepted, which leaves a good 34 drones finding their targets at 11 locations. So that is quite a number of drones. Cumulatively over the weeks, these and days and weeks and months, this really hurts. If you're 25 to 40 drones get through routinely every single night, that hurts. It really does. Now, Ukraine hit that Shahed depot on the previous night. That is hopefully going to have an effect at some point. It'd be interesting to see the numbers. I was questioned on this, about how we talk about depots getting hit and launch sites and military industrial complex, but there's no kind of there's no evidence that actually the drone production has been in any way affected. And I disagree with this. So I just want to very quickly go over this one more time. And we will look at where do we have it? The drone numbers here. Now, the initial, if we look at this, initially you might think, let's get a slightly different view of this. Initially, you might think that, hey, look, it's gone up exponentially. There is no effect of these strikes. But the thing is that this patch here did change. So there is a drop. As you can see, there are these white areas. White means nothing. So there was a particular day there when there were no drones sent. There were particular days when there were fewer drones sent. But this patch here is, even though it looks like it's continued in this trend, actually there is a difference here. So that and you can see from the green line, which is a 7-day moving average, the 7-day moving average went right down there. There's this patch here as well. So this was the patch I was telling you about, that where I think the military industrial complex was hit. And I was saying that they have had an effect. So there are times when they have been affected, the Russians. But remember, and one of the biggest pieces of evidence was everyone was talking about they're going to be producing 1,000 a day. They're going to be sending 1,000 a day. There was that day they sent 800. They've had 600s and 800s. And we do have these really huge forays, these days or nights of huge, well, actually days and nights of huge drone numbers being sent into Ukraine. My point is that it would be way worse than it is now had there not been successes in striking the Russian military-industrial complex. It is not a smooth ride up here. It is a bumpy ride. You can see from the green 7-day rolling averages that there are periods where the Russians, I would say broadly speaking, there are 3 periods here where the Russians, or actually 4, where the Russians haven't been able to continue at the previous levels. So, you've got that level there. You can tell from the gradient here. So the blue line is the total number of drones, and intercepted doesn't include all the drones, this particular data sheet. But you can see it's really steep here, and then it shallows off here, and then it gets steeper there, and then there's a slightly shallower period there, and then that seems fairly consistent. But actually, there's this period in here where they've had a bit of trouble. So, if you look at the data on a granular level, you can see patterns, and I think that reflects what Ukraine has been successful in doing in terms of striking the Russian military-industrial complex. It would have been worse had they not done that. But what they really need to do, because what's happening is that Russia is consistently ramping up production. So as Russia's ramping up production, Ukraine is there then sometimes halting production, or not halting, but hindering production to some degree, but they're still increasing. It's all this move forward and forward. Compared to right back here earlier on in the war, it's just a completely different kettle of fish. What Ukraine needs to do is have a fundamental effect on the production, and that would be the destruction of Yelabuga. So what they've done, there are different ways of. So, in fact, what you're seeing on the screen now is a good example of this. There are different ways of dealing with the drones. One is you hit the production. 2, you hit the launches. Well, no. 1, you hit the production. 2, you hit the storage and the depots. 3, you hit the launches, and 4, you hit them as they're flying. The best, and it's just like healthcare. The best form of healthcare, the best form of defense here is to actually cure, which is to prevent. Which is to stop them from manufacturing these things in the first place. Hit production. The worst thing you can do is hit the drones when they're in the air, because they're already flying. They're going to fall down and cause damage, and many will get through. If you're relying on your sticking plaster approach, that is going to be the most expensive, I think, and the least efficient way of dealing with the drones. But however, you have to put your sticking plaster on when you are bleeding. So the point is, you want to stop yourself bleeding, but you are going to have to shoot drones down when they are flown into your country, into your airspace. So you need really good interception, and that's why they're working on interceptor drones. This was originally claimed, this video you're watching at the moment, originally claimed to be an interceptor drone, but it's way too fast for that. It's actually a missile. Takes out a drone as it's in its terminal phase, right? So that will cause damage down below. That's all going to fall down into a residential area. Really need to see Yelabuga and other facilities taken out. But the next best thing is a storage once they've been built. And that's what we saw 2 nights ago in Donetsk. We do see launch sites hit. So at that strike in Donetsk, they were also striking launch sites. I don't know whether launch mechanisms for Shaheds is something that can be taken out. I've seen them launch from the back of SUVs, but they also do have like static launch mechanisms, I think. So there are different ways of launching them, and obviously taking them out is going to help stop drones in the air, so on and so forth. So they are trying to work at all points of the process there. Here is them working on that last kind of sticking plaster approach, which is shooting the drones down. Brief update on Skynex in Ukraine. So this is the Oreklion auto, a big sort of cannon that the Germans at Rheinmetall have made. You can put that turret on. It can be a palletized system where you can just plop it down and then pick it up and move it somewhere else. It can be operated remotely. Or you can put it on a Leopard 1 chassis. That's called the Sky Ranger. Or you get the other mobile versions of these. Now, according to information provided by the Rheinmetall CEO, Armin Papaga, during a Q3 conference call, the Skynex air defense systems supplied by Germany have now proven themselves to fight in the fight against Russian missiles, which is unsurprising since a Gepard, a an older version of this, really. It's kind of an old analog of what the Skynex is, has been able to shoot down cruise missiles. So you expect this to be able to, because it's better than the Gepard. However, we've not yet seen any visual confirmation or received more details on the matter. I don't mean to imply he's lying, but, obviously it'd be good to see the video evidence. Video footage and details of Skynex's air defense systems in the AFU service are rarely released, and so far only shows the interception of Russian loitering munitions, as you can see from the video that was on the screen. Officially, Germany has so far delivered 2 Skynex systems to Ukraine and promised 2 more. Unofficially, at least one, if not both, of the promised systems should already be in service in Ukraine, as both were to be delivered by the end of 2025. And videos suggest that they are both, or at least one of them is in service. Now, I talked about this yesterday on my hits and losses, on my military aid video. This was a French chief of the general staff of the armed forces of France, Fabien Mondon. He said, in the near term, Ukrainians need help, and what they need most is air defense, as they face numerous Russian attacks every week. In just 1 week, Russia launches about 1,700 drones against Ukraine. But in addition to drones, there are also highly advanced missiles that are difficult to intercept. And he said, the Russians have adapted the flight profiles of their most advanced missiles after realizing they were being intercepted by Ukrainian air defenses. So these are your cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. Today, the Patriot system struggles to intercept them, while SAMP-T does. It's a huge call. In a world where the Patriot has become almost synonymous with protection, the solution developed by the French, Italians, and the British has proven to work, and in fact works better than the Patriot. I didn't know the British was involved in the SAMP-T. Anyway, so he's saying that the SAMP-T is operating better than the Patriot, especially since the Russians have updated their missiles. We have provided support in the field of air defense, and when I was recently informed that our SAMP-T system intercepted missiles that the Patriots failed to stop, the Ukrainians expressed their gratitude. Now, this is very interesting. And a big claim here that 1, Russians have adapted their missiles. 2, Patriot is struggling to then shoot these missiles down. 3, SAMP-T is actually doing a better job than Patriot on taking down these missiles, and the Ukrainians know about this and they've been thankful for it. Now, this is the old SAMP-T system, or the existing SAMP-T system, that is going to be replaced by the SAMP-T NG, which supposedly will be much better able to deal with, say, for example, ballistic missiles. Now, I reported this and this is a pretty big call. I'm really interested to know how accurate it is, because obviously there's going to be an element of PR, marketing, so on and so forth. And if it is accurate, then why the hell have the Ukrainians not got 10 times the number of SAMP-Ts than they have at the moment? Colby Badwar from Tochny said, imagine believing this LMAO, laugh my ass off. So he's dismissed what the French chief of defense staff has said. And actually another guy from Tochny, John Ridge, who's a bit of a missile expert, says a remarkable claim that is flatly untrue. Thank you very much, Ivan. Oh, do you know what? Need a cup of tea. Throat is feeling it. That's amazing. So he says it's a remarkable claim that is flatly untrue. SAMP-T is certainly a capable surface-to-air missile system, but as currently fielded, it is limited by its sensors compared to an MPQ-65 for the Patriot. And we can look at what an MPQ-65 looks like as a radar system. There you go. That's the, if I look at the images here, yeah, you get the idea. It's going to look something like that for the Patriot. So he says, compared to that system that the Patriot uses, John Ridge says, Arabelle, which is the SAMP-T version, is simply inadequate for current TBM threats, so ballistic missile threats. Hence why it will be replaced by the SAMP-T NG, as I mentioned. So these two, at least, he says, this is not some great secret either. I've spoken to operators of the system at length. They repeatedly stress SAMP-T's limitations due to Arabelle as a fire control radar. So John Ridge saying that this is just absolute BS. I do wonder whether you could plug in the SAMP-T then to other existing systems in the kind of centralized air defense control system that they've got, the IAMD, whatever it is, all those letters that Ukraine was provided. Thierry was telling me, Thierry Schmidlin, who is a great supporter of the channel, he was telling me in a thread the other day that actually Ukraine doesn't have access to Link 16. Link 16 is what joins, planes to radars to air defense, so that it all works together. And there is a claim that actually Link 16 isn't quite working for them, or something. So I don't know. I need to look into that. But otherwise, I'd be wondering whether Santi could get around the Arabelle weakness by plugging itself into the other NATO radars. I'm sure with NATO interoperability, there would be that potential. So anyway, I'd be fascinated to know what the truth is here. Okay, the Russian strike, not because at the end of the day, somebody's lying. or not necessarily lying. Somebody's lying or is incorrect here. Like either John Ridge and Colby Badwar are incorrect, or this guy is incorrect because he's either lying or has been lied to, or people have misunderstood somewhere along the line. But somebody's wrong. The Russian strike. There have been Russian strikes. Apparently, power has been knocked out in Dnipropetrovsk region. This was yesterday, actually daytime. Miners are continuing to rise to the surface. There were 2,595 people underground, according to the Ministry of Energy, when power was lost in Dnipropetrovsk. So I presume this is in various different mines, and that was as a result, I think, from the strikes the night before. I presume they're all kind of safe and whatnot. And this is from today, though. This is Lozova this morning in Kharkiv Oblast, I believe. There are no precise details, but there don't appear to be serious injuries at this stage. Overnight in Kharkiv, Chuhiv was also hit by a massive drone. Scary scenes as a whole parking lot was taken. Actually, this isn't in Lozova. This is in Kharkiv, though, in Chuhiv. In Lozova, there is apparently a power cut at the moment. So power has been lost in some places in Ukraine as a result of overnight strikes, but we don't have too much detail of these overnight strikes that you can see in terms of the number of drones that have got through. 36 now. No, 34 drones. Now, I often say that if you don't see lots of public photos of destruction done by, say, in this case, 34 drones, stuff like the photos I was just showing you, you would hope to see lots of these photos, because if you don't see them, it means that most of those drones have gone and hit something far more sensitive. And it sounds horrible, but you almost want there to be more damage done to hopefully empty residential buildings, not causing any deaths or injuries. But otherwise, it means that they've hit sensitive military targets, which is long-term more problematic for the Ukrainians, like military industrial complex, drone manufacturing, so on and so forth. But they dialed down the reporting on that for obvious reasons. Now, Chuhiv, as mentioned, in the Kharkiv region, was heavily attacked last night. The town in Kharkiv was subject to drone swarm attacks by Russia. This was being reported by Tim White last night. 10 explosions were heard in Chuhiv, according to witnesses. There are no immediate reports of injuries. Officials say civilian enterprise and a school have been damaged. So that was what was claimed last night. And there are some quite striking images coming from there. He also said that explosions in Zaporizhia as well. No one known to be injured. But yeah, so details are thin on the ground for Russian attacks, and no details at all about Ukrainian attacks last night whatsoever. I did see a drone bomber map, but it wasn't like one of the biggest attacks, but there were drones that did go into Russia and occupied territories. We just don't know anything about what was hit, if anything was. So going back to 2 nights ago and the strike on the Donetsk airport Shahed drone base or drone depot, according to the Telegram channel Dozhye Shpionya, and supported by maps from Telegram channel Cyber Borosho, the yesterday's strike resulting in a huge explosion was caused by hitting the Donetsk airport, which has been turned into a drone base. The statement: in the evening of the 5th of November, the strike was carried out on launch positions and storage facility to ground 2 drones on the Donetsk airport base. During the attack, both cruise missiles and strike drones were used as a result of the strike. So this is just going over what we heard yesterday, just to remind you. So they used cruise missiles and drones. Ammunition warehouse was completely destroyed. The fuel depot was destroyed. The drone pre-launch preparation point was destroyed, and power supply and communication units were damaged. So talking about that process, manufacturing, depot where you have to put the warheads on. I presume you put the warheads on at the depot rather than at the manufacturing facility, and then the launch, and then they shoot them down. We're looking at the depot, put the warheads on, and launch here, and both of these elements were taken out. At the time of the strike, there were up to 1,000 Grand 2 drones and more than 1,500 warheads at the airfield. So power supply and communication units were also damaged there. And as I showed you in my live stream yesterday, there is video now of the strike. So I believe, is there? Yes. Yes. Sorry, see so many things. I suddenly doubted myself. Jane Keefe says Ukraine just destroyed 1,000 Shahids in a single strike. If only the West would allow Ukraine to destroy the factories that make them. I think that must be coming. There, what is the reason why they have been waiting to take that place out? You'd hope that. I mean, is it Tomahawks? Do they just need Tomahawks to do that? I don't know. So yes, as we've heard, all of those things were targeted at the airbase that used to be the front line of fighting around Avdiivka there. Now, Jimmy Russian was saying, I was looking at satellite imagery of the new Russian drone base at Donetsk airport just a few months ago with a friend, and we both came to the conclusion that Ukraine was deliberately not shelling the installation until it was full of drones. So they saw it a couple of months ago, saw that it was a viable target. Why the hell hadn't they hit it? So therefore, if they hadn't hit it and they know about it, because hey, we know about it and we're just security analysts, it must be that they haven't hit it for a reason. Well, a couple of months later, it's been filled up with 1,500 drone warheads and 1,000 drones. Now's the time to hit it. Big kaboom. Last night, apparently, it was full of drones. So there you go. Now, here is the video of the drone storage site being struck. I will show you this while I drink some tea. You can see something's already on fire there, and that could be the cruise missiles that have already done that. Obviously, you're not going to get FPV cruise missiles, so the imagery is always going to come from drones. That's interesting because that's a drone hitting what looks like something that hasn't been hit previously, and that looks like some kind of mound, maybe, where they've got the equipment below the surface. I don't know. I would have thought you'd want to hit first with cruise missiles with bunker busting capability. So I don't quite know what's going on here. There could also be multiple sites. So, where you can see these drones hitting stuff that's already burning, that might be one site, and hitting the site that isn't burning might be done, at a different place. But anyway, there is video evidence out to, there's already video evidence of this, as you saw the burning facility from the ground level from locals. But now we have the video imagery from, I think it's really cool to get video imagery from these FP-2 drones that are your medium range drones, as mentioned, that appear to be utilized like oversized FPV drones. Drones also visited occupied Simferopol overnight. This is actually 2 nights ago. The Kremsneftbit oil depot in the village of Bitumnoye caught fire. I don't know if that was one of the places that was hit in the previous FP2 drone footage I showed you in the first part of this video. Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed to have shot down 7 drones over Crimea, but it seems something still made it through. As you can see, the Russians often claim that they shoot down all of the Ukrainian drones. And then, you only need to see a video like this of, oil depots and oil trains getting hit by these drones to know that the Russians just lie. So they obviously lie about having 100% success rate with Ukrainian drones. Okay, so now moving on, we are going to get to, so still on hits and losses. Still on the distant strikes section. This is talking about the Volgograd refinery that was hit. Was it 2 nights ago as well, or was it 3 nights ago now? Anyway, after being hit, it says last night on the 6th. So actually, this is 2 nights ago. After being hit 2 nights ago, the Lukoil refinery in Volgograd, Russia, has stopped all operations. This has been reported by Reuters. They said that the primary processing unit, the CDU-5, with a daily capacity of 9,100 metric tons, or 66,700 barrels per day, a fifth of the plant's total capability, and a hydrocracker with a capacity of 11,000 tons per day were damaged during the attack. Lukoil did not respond to a request for comment. The plant has stopped, CDU fibers on fire. There is some damage to the hydrocracker, one of the sources who spoke on condition of anonymity said. So that's really good news. Reuters says the Volgograd oil refinery has halted operations after overnight Ukrainian drone attacks. The AVT-5 unit, 3.3 million tons a year, caught fire. And as mentioned, the hydrocracker was damaged, cutting the refinery's capacity by about 20%. This marks a sixth confirmed hit on the facility. So they keep coming back to make sure that any repairs are nullified or that other areas are damaged, causing further issues for their oil processing. Now, we're going to then look in a second as to how that is impacting Russia. But first of all, Ukrainian prosecutors, in our section for other bits and pieces, Ukrainian prosecutors have told the UN that Russia's 190,000 war crimes aren't just chaos, they're part of the planned genocidal strategy. 5,100 plus drone attacks on civilians in 2025 alone, twice last year's number, the Prosecutor General's office has said. Like, if you are still someone that thinks that Russia aren't the bad guys here, honestly, your head is screwed on the wrong way. Now, Czechia, with their new Andrej Babiš-led government and their new parliamentary speaker, Tomio Okamura, who is this ultra-nationalist in Czechia, he has ordered the removal of Ukrainian flags from the parliament building shortly after taking office. During the election campaign, the SPD leader, this is a far-right coalition actually, made a number of anti-Ukrainian statements. Opposition parties then put up flags from their windows, which is awesome. So there's still some support there from pro-Ukrainian Czech lawmakers. So you can see the Ukrainian flag there from one of their windows, and others putting up Ukrainian flags. So that's a pirates party of Czechia. It's really sad. The direction of travel for the Czech government at the moment is just really against Ukraine. Then we're going to go to the US just briefly. President Trump on his talks with Modi. So we're going to start talking about oil again. It's going good. He largely stopped buying oil from Russia, said Trump, rather vaguely. And, he thinks that India is doing a good turn in ordering less Russian oil. Trump told reporters that Russian exports have dropped significantly and reiterated his call to end the war. Quote, a lot of people are dying. A lot of Russian soldiers are dying. At some point, we think they'll get smart and stop the war. So, yeah, 2 weeks. But anyway, the sanctions have been put on, that being said, and there is pressure on India, I would say, and China. I don't know about China, but there's certainly been pressure on India to buy less Russian hydrocarbon exports. Right, Swiss oil trader Gunvor. So this is this entity that was going to buy up Lukoil as it divests its international arms. Well, Swiss oil trader Gunvor has abandoned plans to buy international assets from Russian company Lukoil following statements from the US and threats of sanctions, according to Gunvor Group and the US Treasury Department. Now, quote, as long as Putin continues the senseless killings of Kremlin's puppet, Gunvor will never get a license to operate and profit, the US agency says in a statement. In response, Gunvor called the allegations fundamentally false, but then confirmed that they are withdrawing from their proposed buy. So this is incredible. So Swiss oil trader Gunvor dropped a bid for Lukoil's international assets after the US Treasury labeled it a Kremlin puppet. I talked about the other day how I'm certain that Gunvor would be somehow engaged in a buyout of Lukoil assets in a way that benefits Lukoil the most. Right? Lukoil are obviously going to opt for something that allows them either continued control and or continued profit making, where the money comes back to them rather than complete sell off and divestment. I assume that they would exhaust all kind of clever loopholes first. And I said, I can bet you can bet your bottom dollar that Gunvor's got some kind of connection to, and it does have connections, but it was thought that well, anyway, without wanting to get into the deep weeds of Gunvor, the US Treasury Department have labeled it Putin's puppet. And so there you go. Gunvor, co-founded by Putin ally Gennady Timchenko, denied the claims, but they did withdraw its offer. Quote, Treasury Department statement about Gunvor is fundamentally misinformed and false. Gunvor is and always has been open and transparent about its ownership and business, and has for more than a decade actively distanced itself from Russia, stopped trading in line with sanctions, sold off Russian assets, and publicly condemned the war in Ukraine. We welcome the opportunity to ensure this clear misunderstanding is corrected. In the meantime, Gunvor withdraws its proposal for Lukoil's international assets. Interesting. So that's going to present, I think, more problems for Lukoil going forward. And then you got Ural Vagonzavod. So these guys make locomotives and tanks. Is launching a major wave of staff cuts, according to E1. Ural Vagonzavod is Russia's largest manufacturer of railway cars and a main supplier of tanks to the army. 10% of its workforce will be laid off in February 2026. This is huge, right? And it's a massive sign that the Russian military-industrial complex is unable to sustain the war effort. It just gets worse for Russia, says the analyst on Blue Sky. Says Ural Vagonzavod, which makes Russian tanks and other vehicles, is laying off 50% of its staff by the end of February. So, okay, one says 10% of its workforce. So there's a difference of opinion here. But anyway, and declining to hire any new workers. They simply can't get orders for enough of their business to keep things as they are. The Lukoil terminal at Tuapse has been shut down by Ukrainian attacks. This is bad news for the worst kind because no oil can be loaded on tankers. Russia doesn't have anywhere to store so much. We're talking 3 million barrels a day. So the only solution is to stop sucking it out of the ground. Refineries can't handle that much. And the new sanctions have caused oil import cancellations around the world. Some 300 Russian-owned tankers are currently at sea filled with crude oil and have nowhere to go. Without them returning to pick up at terminals, the whole system starts to break down. Even if they did get back empty, they can't load anything at Tuapse, and Ust-Luga isn't working at full capacity in the Baltic due to damage. Russian thermal power stations are also starting to feel the effect of attacks, the largest in Russia having been hit, but it's a huge site with several sets of generators producing 3,600 megawatt hours. In total, it's going to take some repeated strikes to get offline completely, but it supplies 1.5% of Russian needs and feeds Moscow much of its power. So that was the thermal power plant, the I forget the name of it, reported it 2 nights ago. So, Russia's being hit from all sorts of different directions. But when you see the military-industrial complex not operating at full capacity, something's wrong. Like, Russia is in the middle of a war where it desperately needs mechanized equipment. And if you're laying off workers at your mechanized equipment factories, it's got to tell you they're in trouble. Now, Bulgaria plans to seize and sell Lukoil's refinery in Burgas. Bulgarian media outlets reported Sofia is drafting amendments to its legislation that would allow the state to take control of Lukoil's refinery and sell it to a new owner. This is linked to the risk of fuel supply disruptions caused by US sanctions against the Russian company. The draft law provides for the appointment of the external administrator who would temporarily take over the plant's management and organize its sale without Lukoil's involvement. So this looks good, as Reuters reports. Meanwhile, the international oil trader, Gunvor, as we've heard, has announced that it's abandoning plans, so on and so forth. So Lukoil's shares on the Moscow exchange dropped by more than 4%, it reports there. Now, going back to the United States, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff has said, I think what we're trying to do in Gaza with the CMCC, that is the paradigm or the model for what will happen in Ukraine-Russia war when we settle that, and we will settle it. And I think that's probably the most important one to settle next. But as someone says, no, do not let the Americans dictate any part of our peace. You don't want them to take that Gaza approach, which essentially, I don't want to get into long weeds of that one either, but that would be bad for Ukraine, 100%. Now, I've got 2 things to leave you with. This is fascinating. Sergei Lavrov needs to maybe stay away from the windows. My goodness. So the absolute, legend, scare quotes, legend of Russian the foreign affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, their foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has reportedly fallen out of favor after failing to arrange a Putin-Trump summit, according to the Moscow Times. Okay, pinch of salt. He was notably absent from yesterday's Security Council meeting, the only permanent member to miss it, and has also lost his role as head of Russia's G20 delegation. I suppose you could maybe think there might be health issues, but it could well be that actually he's finally come up short. So wait a second, where's Lavrov, says Nexter. He was absent from yesterday's meeting where Putin was throwing around threats of nuclear tests. Kommersant politely wrote that the foreign minister was absent by agreement. Almost simultaneously, Lavrov lost his status as head of the Russian delegation at the G20 summit. He's also vanished from the information field. His last public statements were made in late October, and earlier we reported that the Russian leadership is looking for those responsible for the failed Putin-Trump talks in Budapest. Lavrov has been named the main culprit. Wow. I mean, maybe have health issues as well, or either or he has genuinely fallen out of favor. Now, if someone as important as Lavrov has fallen out of favor, that could indicate fractures. It could indicate issues in the Kremlin there. Absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to play you this to end with. Now, this is BBC Newsnight, kind of flagship political program. And you've got the former NATO Secretary General Rasmussen here being really forthright, and I tend to agree with him. I really think his rationale is spot on here, talking about how NATO need to put boots on the ground, because otherwise you are never forcing Russia's hand. You're never forcing Putin's hand. Really, really interesting. So I'm going to play the whole of this for you.
That we need a dramatically new strategy and approach. We are working and walking too slowly. For instance, the coalition of the willing. I appreciate leadership of the UK and France in building a coalition of the willing that is prepared to do what is needed. But it has become a coalition of the waiting.
Coalition of the willing is waiting for a ceasefire. That's the right approach, isn't it? Or are you saying they should get in there before a ceasefire?
They should deploy troops immediately.
Wow.
Because if you make a deployment of troops dependent on consent from Putin, you will give Putin an extra incentive to continue the war to avoid such deployment.
Such a good point. Like, if you're waiting for ceasefire, then before you get NATO troops on the ground, then that is the incentive not to have a ceasefire as far as Putin's concerned. Well, let's keep this thing going for as long as possible. You get the ceasefire because you put NATO troops on the ground, is what Rasmussen's point is. You need to force Putin into making a decision that you want him to.
So that's why we should take that decision immediately.
So just to clarify, you're talking about European boots on the ground in Ukraine?
Yes, but not on the front line. The front line will still be the Ukrainians. They are much better at fighting the Russians. Our troops should be deployed behind the lines to protect population centers and critical infrastructure.
It's a big gamble.
It
is a big gamble.
But if you give in to threats from Putin, then you are doomed to fail. The only way...
If you give in to threats from Putin, you are doomed to fail. Bring it on.
To force Putin into a peace negotiation process is to put more pressure on Putin. Putin has no incentive whatsoever to engage in a peace process as long as he believes he can win on the battlefield. We have to change his calculus. And lesson learned from history is appeasement with dictators does not lead to peace. It leads to war and conflict.
Appeasement of dictators does not lead to peace. That spot on as far as I'm concerned. Let me know what you think about that, because that's pretty controversial. NATO troops in Ukraine, you're not going to get NATO nations across the board agreeing to that. But I think I think we need a no-fly zone, a NATO enforced no-fly zone, or through bilateral agreements, maybe the coalition of willing no-fly zone, where you have kind of Eurofighters and Gripens making sure that things are shot down in the west of Ukraine and that they are helping out within Ukraine. And then you get NATO air defense systems operating. I think, you've got to start creeping into Ukraine and protecting critical infrastructure, such as a military industrial complex. So it gives Ukraine a chance. Because do you know what? North Koreans are in Russia. So, you know, please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.